Rachel Holt for Nesson.com. Welcome to our Fantasy Football Podcast. It's the beginning of September, and if you didn't already draft your fantasy team, this is a friendly reminder that you better do it soon. Joined by Adam Rank of NFL Media. Adam, thank you.
Oh, the pleasure, of course, is always on this side of the phone, and I've had a couple of drafts already last weekend. Got a couple of more big ones coming up, so it's an exciting time of year, especially when you live out in Southern California and your favorite team's the Angels, and we're almost eliminated. I'm not saying we're completely eliminated. 13 games back from the wild card. If the Yankees can think that they're still in it, even though they're just 2 back, they're so happy to tell everybody, like, hey, we're 2.5 back. It's like, yeah, you have to jump 5 teams, though. So shut up, Yankee fans. I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. We're supposed to talk fantasy.
We are, but while you're on the topic, and we have a lot of Red Sox fans who are listening, what is your prediction? Are we going to make the playoffs?
Yeah, I like the way the season's unfolding for the Red Sox. I think Kansas City's kind of the wild card there, kind of hanging on. I think Houston is starting to put together some things too. The West is kind of weird to watch that too. So I'm thinking, if I had to make a prediction, I think it's going to be Boston, and I think the Kansas City Royals are going to sneak in there. And I don't think a lot of people, if they're able to get past Boston in that 1-game playoff, I don't think a lot of people are going to want to deal with them.
A man of many talents. You're talking MLB, talking NFL, but all we really care about is our fantasy points, and we want to make sure that you make us look good come our fantasy draft. So let's hunker down. The last time we chatted, we talked about some draft day do's or don'ts. Now let's dig a little deeper. Up until last week, there have been relatively few preseason injuries. Now we have both Tony Romo and Teddy Bridgewater going down with injuries that you hate to see. And, of course, when a quarterback gets injured, it affects the fantasy values of all the people around them. So let's touch on this. First, Tony Romo. What does his injury do to Dallas' offense?
You know, I think Dallas' offense is still going to be able to plug him in and play. And if you've looked at rookie quarterbacks over the last, let's go back 5 years and think about guys like Russell Wilson, who did very well as a rookie. RG3, of course, had an amazing start to his NFL career, even though it got derailed in recent seasons. Colin Kaepernick, although he wasn't a rookie when he first started playing, like, he was very good. And, of course, Marcus Mariota kind of turned the fantasy world on fire at the beginning of last season. His first 3 games were amazing. And the one common thread you have with all these quarterbacks is that they have an ability to run. And so that is the great equalizer in fantasy football for these quarterbacks, because especially if you play in leagues that are standard with the 4 points for a passing touchdown, the rushing really kind of brings some, I don't want to say mediocre quarterbacks, because actually I do, because I'm going to say Tim Tebow, but it also helps those quarterbacks who are young, who are able to make plays with their legs. So I'm excited for what the Cowboys can do. I think they've got the best line in football. They've got a top 5 wide receiver. They've got a running back who really knows what he's ready. He knows what he's doing, and he's ready to take on the NFL. So as a pure football standpoint, I think the Cowboys can still go out there and win games. And if you're somebody who's already drafted Dez Bryant, don't worry about that. It's all about the volume of targets. That's the guy Dak Prescott's going to be looking at week in and week out. And I think if you drafted Ezekiel Elliott, I think he's going to continue. He hasn't done anything yet, but I think he's going to be good. So I really wouldn't panic too much if you bought in on any of those guys.
Okay, I actually had a draft yesterday, and Dez Bryant went in the 2nd round. Would you still consider him to be a first-round draft pick?
You know, it really depends on how your drafts are breaking out. I mean, I typically like to go wide receiver heavy to start my drafts, and that's what I want to do. But, you know, if things change and things, you know, there's certain runs, you really are costing yourself if you don't move like an amoeba and just adapt to everything that's going on around you. I think we talked about that last week.
Right.
I like Dez I still think he's a top 5 guy. I would, if my druthers would be, if I was holding the number 5 spot and we went AB, OBJ, JJ, and AJ, which is a lot of initials going there, then I would go DEZ with the 5th pick. I really wouldn't be too concerned about it because I would want to stack my lineup with the receivers. But I've seen him, like you said, go at the end of the 2nd round. I've seen some people put together some pretty good teams because he does slide down, because people do have that fear about a rookie quarterback. But I think too much is made of it. I mean, if you look back at Josh Gordon's amazing season a few years ago, and everybody was kind of raving about, like, whoa, he's doing it without a great quarterback. You're like, yeah, that's usually what happens because it's the volume of targets. And so that's the biggest key. I don't see the targets falling away from Dez. I don't think they're going to be targeting Terrence Williams. I don't think Devin Street's going to be stealing away any targets or Cole Beasley. So I would be very comfortable with this.
Okay, it seems like you're saying that Ezekiel Elliott's production won't really be affected by Romo's injury. Are you having any doubts about drafting him early, given that we really haven't seen too much from him in the preseason?
I think we saw enough of him at Ohio State, and I think that we know that if the pedigree that he's coming in with is top-notch. He's you hate to say can't-miss prospect in the NFL because there's so many different things that can happen to players, especially as they make the transition to the professional level. Although he was at Ohio State, so he probably already was a professional player. But I will say the one thing that makes the Dallas Cowboys running back so intriguing is that it's that offensive line. I mean, DeMarco Murray led the NFL in rushing in 2014. Darren McFadden came up, rushed for more than 1,000 yards. Like, that was an amazing season. We should be talking about that more with great deference. Like, that's pretty incredible. The dude who's always been hurt, like it's the guy from Con Air who's sitting there waiting for the insulin shot for the whole movie, and then all of a sudden he's able to fight off bullets from John Malkovich. Like, it's that kind of thing. Like, Darren McFadden just became RoboCop all of a sudden and was running extensively. So it's the line. I mean, I'll be honest, if Ezekiel Elliott was playing for any other team, outside of the Raiders maybe, because their offensive line's really good. If he would, let's say if he was drafted by Cleveland, yeah, I would be like, nah, I'm not doing it. I don't want to get caught up, and I know people would make the comparisons to Trent Richardson. But if it was any other team, he would probably move down to the second, probably the third round. But because it's Dallas, it was the perfect situation. I think every fantasy enthusiast watching the draft this year was like, please go to Dallas. And that's exactly what happens, and that's why everybody's buying it.
What about Dak Prescott? Do we take him as one of our backup quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks? Where does he fall in all of this?
You know, I'm not ready to play him in a 10-team standard league, maybe not even a 12-team standard league. But, of course, the deeper that you get, he's going to be a pretty good value. The one spot that I really like him at is at DFS. And I'm excited to see where he's going to be slotted whenever you're – can you play in New England? I'm sorry if you guys can't do that. I know some of those states have had trouble with DFS, but if you're allowed to play DFS, he is going to be on a lot of people's teams because, again, if you look at some of those major rookie quarterbacks, and I'll just go to Marcus Mariota last year. I mean, he was amazing, and he was the guy when I like to play a lot of DFS myself, and week one, I was like, I'm going to take a chance on him because he likes to run, and then it ended up working out pretty well. So he's a great DFS spot.
Okay, so it seems like you think Dallas is going to be quite all right without Romo there. Let's talk about the Vikings, though. The Vikings offense, it seems to be in disarray since Teddy Bridgewater went down with his devastating knee injury. Apparently, the quick-thinking trainers, they may have saved his leg, is what I'm hearing, with their quick accidents, so he'll be out for the entire season. Because of that, do you consider Adrien Peterson to be a reliable pick?
You know, the value or the spot where you're going to have to take Adrien Peterson, I don't really want to be taking a running back there. There's a couple of guys that I had already slotted ahead of him. I like, obviously, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, David Johnson, just two guys who I think probably were going to be a better value and a better pick than Adrien Peterson. But the one thing that you can say about him is that over the course of his career, like, he has done so well with all the curtain jerkers and the mid-card jobbers who have been, been quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. Like, Gus Frerotte was his quarterback. Like, Bobby Wade was the Vikings' leading receiver in Adrien Peterson's second year when he rushed for 1,800 yards. So it's not like he's been surrounded by this all-star talent. Like, he's seen 8-man boxes for his entire career. So this is no different. And really, Teddy Bridgewater passed for 3,000 yards and 14 touchdowns last year. So it's not like Teddy Bridgewater was really lighting it up. And from a basic football standpoint, the Vikings should be right about where they were going to be. They're still a playoff team. That defense is really good. That defense is actually on the cusp of being special, being Seattle Seahawks from a couple of years ago special. I'm not sure if they're quite there. I think before Teddy Bridgewater's injury, I had them as a Super Bowl contender, but now I feel like they're just a playoff contender. So from a football standpoint, they're still going to be very respectable and very good. But I really haven't been going in on Stephon Diggs or Laquan Treadwell, who I really loved at Mississippi, but I just don't feel that the value's there, or excuse me, the volume of targets is there. As we were talking about Dez, where whatever quarterback is in there is going to be throwing the ball to him all the time, the Vikings just aren't going to have that kind of offense, and they're just not going to ask any quarterback, whether it was Teddy Bridgewater or Sean Hill, they were not going to ask him to pass the ball a lot. So I would stay away from the receivers still. I hope you weren't planning on doing it. I hope you didn't. If you were going to take one, Stephon Diggs has the most value to me. But Adrien Peterson should be fine, and that's really the only person you should be caring about in that offense.
Kind of sounds like you're saying stay away from the Vikings offense if you want reliable choices out there.
Well, I mean, outside of Adrien Peterson, of course, I'm okay with. I mean, I know some people like to go running back first. Like, for whatever reason, they don't want to admit that the NFL has kind of evolved into a passing league, and I know those people. I've done drafts with those people. So, and that's fine. I mean, he's a great running back. He's going to finish, top 5 more than likely. But, but I'll never draft, but I'm never say never, but I won't take him. And I know, what's funny is I have him in a keeper league, and I've been trying to trade him to like everybody in my league. And I tried to trade him straight up for AJ Green. And it's crazy because whenever I say that stuff on the show, people are like, you're a lunatic. Like, how dare you? I'm like, bro, I can't even make that deal in my league. So, I guess what I'm saying is Adrien Peterson is fine. Don't get mad at me, but I'm not taking a running back that early. And, I don't want anybody else. So I guess you're right. Yes, that is what I'm saying.
Speaking of being
it sounded so harsh when you first said it. I'm like, wait. I'm like, no, you're right. Don't take anybody.
Well, speaking of harsh, and speaking of being a lunatic, a lot of people think you're crazy for something that you've been saying on your show. And you've been on the record taking a kicker.
All right.
Really early. I think you're giving a lot of people, your fellow fantasy football experts, you're giving them heart attacks, it sounds like. Why are you picking him so early? And you are speaking to a New England audience, so people are going to understand more so than any of your other audiences. So why?
They don't, Rachel. Actually, they come at me even harder. They're like, hey, listen, bro, huge Patriots fan, you're stupid. And it's like they're trying to be nice, and everybody loves Gostkowski and everything. But here is my thing, and I thank you for giving me the platform to kind of express this to everybody, is that over the last couple of years in our NFL Fantasy League, and this is the only league I've done this in. Actually, my friends in the UK, a league I do with them, they actually harangued me into doing this, and I'm like, fine, I'll do it. But anyway, so in the NFL Fantasy League, it's with both shows, NFL Fantasy Live, the new show that's coming out that I'll be on 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which is called Fantasy and Friends. We got together, we've had a league for 6 years? Yeah, 6 years. I've won it 3 times. So I've won half the years that we've played this. Yeah, it's a little bit of a humble brag because I'm trying not to sound like too much of an idiot for taking a kicker in the 5th round. But I said over the last 4 years, I've had a huge problem with the 5th round pick. Like, I've always just bombed it. Like last year, I took Amir Abdullah. It didn't work out. The year before, it was Cordell Patterson, I should say. Awful. Probably the worst one. I took Lamar Miller there 3 years ago when he was looking like the pick to click, and that wasn't good. And then 4 years ago, I took a player who I'm not allowed to talk about anymore, but his receiving yards went from 900 to 400, and his touchdowns decreased as well. I think Patriots fans will be able to figure out who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
but,
I have no idea.
so I'm like, okay. So I took him, and then that was one of the years that he was regressing statistically. So I'm like, I was so mad at the end of last year. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so sick of bombing this pick. I'm going to take a kick. You know what? I'm not going to take just any kicker. I'm going to take the best. I'm going to take Gostkowski, 5th round. Put it in pen. I'm not going to back off of it. And I'm this person. I'm that person who always follows through with what he says. And I'm like that guy who, you know what it's like. You go out, you go to a bar, you meet up with a friend from college. You're like, oh, my God, Sonny, so great to see you. Yes, and you have some drinks. Everybody's a little sloppy. And you're like, yeah, dude, I'm going to call you tomorrow so we can set up some basketball and do that. And then what happens? You never call that person. You never hear from them again. But you know what? I'm the person that does call, and it's always an awkward conversation because, like, I'm sincere. Like, yeah, like, I really want to go play basketball. But, you know, the guy is always like, yeah, dude, I was just being nice. Like, please, let's not do it. Because then you got to go through, like, a couple of little sense text messages. It just never worked out, and it just lingers away. You know, it's just one of those things. So I'm that person. Like, there was a dude, I'll tell you this, too. And I even shared this story on NFL.com.
This is a long
there
one.
was
I'm kind of regretting asking this question.
You should have. You probably regretted calling me. That's the thing. That's where the regret starts. And I know that you're being very kind, and I know that you'll probably be like, yeah, never again. We're never bringing Adam on because this is not helping anybody. But I have to say this, though. Like, I was, you know what, I won't say, I'm gonna tell this story, though. But I was at a Super Bowl party. Actually, that's at the Super Bowl. That's a humble brag again.
That is a humble brag. I was going to call you out on that.
That was terrible. That was really bad. And but I was there, and you go to these tailgate parties where and whoever the beer sponsorship at that time gives you all the alcohol, all the beers you want. But it's obviously Anheuser-Busch now. So we're at a Super Bowl party. We're throwing them back. We're having a good time. I didn't have any game day responsibilities, so this is just a sort of a vacation for me. And there was a guy, you know, who's like, hey, can you come to my draft, dude? That would be so cool. And hang out. And it's a friend of a friend from Southern California. I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't have to fly anywhere or do anything. I'm like, okay. So I went and I found out when his draft was. I had to cancel out on a trip to Las Vegas that my wife and her best friend ended up going out on. And I sat there and I was ready to go. And then he calls and he flakes. And I said, I don't care. I'm still showing up. So I was at that Buffalo Wild Wings in Brea, California, sitting by myself, eating hot wings like a loser. But you know what? I did what I said I was going to do, and that's exactly what I did with Stephen Gostkowski. And you know what? I'm not ashamed of it. I understand people are calling me an idiot and questioning what I'm doing with my life, and I said, you know what? I'm good with it. I really don't care. And really, I will say this. There is a point to this, Rachel. I guarantee you.
Yes.
At some point in your draft, and you're going through these guys, and I'm saying double-digit rounds, from the 10th round on, you're like, you know what? If you know somebody wants Gostkowski, or you feel like, I don't really need to jump on Tajay Sharp right now, take Gostkowski. Like, he's the best at his position. He's the most consistent. And I know that you can look at it and be like, well, I can get a kicker like in the 12th round, or I can get a kicker in the 15th round. And like, okay, none of them are going to be as good. And you can do that with every position. Like last year, if I had built a team of Blake Bortles, Doug Baldwin, Devontae Freeman, Gary Barnes, like I could have done that with just drafting nobody in the first 10 rounds, and I probably would have beaten you with that roster because that's the way it works. So it's like, who cares? Just take a good player. It's not a big thing. And I know that there's going to be people listening to this who are going to be like, I take Gostkowski early, maybe not the 5th round like this lunatic from California, but I still take him early, and I applaud them because I know it's a rough go of it.
No, I know a lot of people will take your advice, so I'm rooting for it to work out for them and you. I have this image in my head now of you just sitting in Buffalo Wild Wings alone, so I'm trying to get that out and focus on the podcast. But it's hard to get past. I have to ask you, you're doing this thing at NFL where you're asking people to submit their favorite fantasy names, and we touched on this last week, but it is the last time before the regular season begins to get in your fantasy names. So what are some of the favorites that you've seen up until this point?
I like the one I usually do is forgetting Brandon Marshall because I'm a Bears fan, yep. And that's a cute one. I think Make America Gronk Again is clever, although everybody seems to do it. So that's the problem. It's like there's a lot of hacky ones that come out, the Forte Ounces, the Freedom, which is always, that was fun a couple of years ago. The Girly Men, all those things that are just like so hacky. I wish there was one. I feel terrible. I should have prepared myself better for this. But there was a great one I saw the other day, and now I'm kicking myself that I can't even think of it. But they come in fast and furious, and there's some really clever people out there. And there's some of them too that they do it, and you're like, you laugh, and then you're like, I'm mad at that person because that was so good, and I didn't think of it.
It makes me feel very incompetent. I don't know if you have the same thoughts.
Right?
I really is Rachel's team or something, and then someone hits me with a whammy. Makes me look
Somebody
bad.
comes up with something genius. and it makes you feel terrible, like you don't want to compete anymore. So I don't know. Actually, you know what? This one, instead of make America Gronk again, which I'm sure is very popular in the New England area. If you're going to take a deep sleeper tight end and you said make America Brate, as in Cameron Brate, the tight end for the Buccaneers, make America Brate again, you've taken something and you've made it your own now.
Did you just think of that on the spot?
Yeah, I just was trying to think of something. Like I was stalling, just trying to just keep saying words like, please God, think of something. Oh my God.
That's not bad. All right, so
it's okay.
Advice, Labor Day weekend is the last time to draft your teams, pretty much. A big draft weekend for those who haven't done so already. Last week, your advice was to be the one that's not the drunkest at the party, and then you'll have the most success. So try to get everyone else, with some libations in their hands and making some bad decisions. What's your advice this week?
You know what? I'll tell you something right now. That worked this weekend, too. Because I was like, I don't know if you're a huge fan or even a casual fan of How I Met Your Mother, but John Lithgow plays Barney's dad, and he was always like, hey, the best trick a magician ever has is a drunk audience. And I was pouring shots for people. I never had one on my own. I had my shot glass, never filled it, poured everybody else's, held up my shot glass high, said, all right, everybody drink up. And it worked wonderfully. And so that's for people of age, of course, be responsible. If anybody's driving, don't do that. But if you're Ubering or whatever and you take public transportation, then you're safe. The one thing that I would like to express, and I feel bad if people are tuning out already because they're like, I'm already sick of this guy. Like, we've known him for 2 weeks. Not a huge fan, which is fine. I get that a lot. But I will say this, and I hope, and this is a little draft nugget for anybody who's hung around for this one. But Spencer Ware really needs to be on your roster this season. His average draft position, according to Fantasy Football Calculator, is the 13th round. You're probably going to have to move on him a little bit sooner than that. Don't be afraid to take him. He's going to be a great value in that Chiefs offense, even if Jamal Charles can return to 100% and be the Jamal Charles that we know and love. Spencer Ware is still going to have a role on this team, so make sure he is on your roster. That is my tip for you this week, and I hope it works out. Don't take him in the 5th round because you know how I feel. I don't do well in the 5th round, but take him. You get to the 10th round, you're like looking at some of the running backs, and you're choosing between him and CJ Procise or somebody like that. You're like, I'm going to go with Spencer Ware. And don't be afraid to do it. I mean, don't do it in the 3rd round, but if it's a little bit earlier than you think, like it's the 9th round or 10th round, you're like, you're fine. Still do it. Like he's going to be somebody to keep an eye on this season. I think he's going to have a good year. I think the Chiefs are going to break out this season and have a good year. So that would be my advice for this week. And and have fun, as always. That's all. That's all I want people to have is fun.
Just fun. Hence the shot.
Which is the opposite of what you're having right now. I'm having a delightful time. I know you're standing out in the rain, listening to me ramble on. Like this is, they don't pay you enough. Whatever you're getting for this, it's definitely not enough.
I think you know my boss, so this might work out for me well in the end. We're here at the Deutsche Bank Championship, as I was explaining to you earlier. And of course it's raining, so welcome to New England, everyone.
That's commitment, though. Listen, as a human being, I would have easily said, you know what, I don't want you standing out in the rain having to do this stuff. We'll do whatever. But you know what? The professional that you are, you said, We're going to make this happen. You are being considerate of my schedule, and I appreciate that. And I know, listen, your boss is getting a text from me immediately after I get off this phone call. But you're doing a great job, so I really do appreciate that. You're a trooper. Adam. You're a pro's pro.
Thank you. And I know you don't have to worry about this, but my hair, you should see my hair after this conversation. It's not looking good. So I'm putting it all out on the line for you. We're so happy to have you on our podcast. Thank you again for all the insight. We really do appreciate it.
No, it really is my pleasure. I like the subtle dig about me with my lack of hair, but listen, don't think that I'm not catching all of these. There's a little scorecard next to me. I've caught a bunch of them, but well, good luck to you on your drafts. If you're playing against your boss, I hope you beat him. And then I'm saving all the good stuff for you. I'm not telling him anything.
All right. Thanks again, Adam Rank. Follow him on Twitter @AdamRank. Right?
That's it. It's simple enough.
Simple. Okay. Thanks, Adam.